Good morning, John.
Good morning, Wales. Little Robin
um,
Williams reference. Nick, I wake up this morning and I, there's a message in my inbox. Check out this tweet from J.K. Rowling. I don't know when that thing went up yesterday. Who found that? Whether it's B or who sent that to
so,
you? But
so B sent it to me, and I'm forever grateful because it's a reply. So it didn't give me I normally get alerts for J.K. Rowling tweets. I didn't get an alert for this, but it's a wonderful surprise.
okay, go. You because it's from you, and my whole day has been down that rabbit hole. Before this conversation, just doing the whoa. Whoa, this was not on the list. This was not on the list of books that Rowling likes, and yet,
I
Nick,
got it.
you spotted it. You've been
I
talking
did.
about this for I don't know how long, and I've
Okay.
just been rolling my eyeballs here, like whatever. 12 book series, really?
So
Uh,
we're talking about Anthony Powell's A Dance to the Music of Time. And when John was compiling this list, it must be 3 years ago, some time ago, uh, uh, and we were looking for all of the books we know J.K. Rowling has read. And I managed to squeeze this, Anthony Powell's A Dance to the Music of Time. I managed to squeeze it on the list. John, I'm very grateful. You allowed me to put it on there with the most tenuous of evidence. She replied to someone that she knows on Twitter, basically with the question, "Have you read Powell's A Dance to the Music of Time?" Which is not any kind of a confirmation that she's read it, let alone likes it. Um, but I took that as a recommendation to someone else. And if you recommend a book to someone else, you're a bad person if you haven't actually read and appreciated that work yourself. So it's been on the list. And
Nick,
because it's
Nick, the only reason it's on the list is because you thought it belonged on the list, and I thought, okay, I'm going with Nick's gut feeling on this.
so
Um,
so uh, late to literature as I am, if it's on the list, it's somewhere on my gigantic reading list. So Austen fans will recognize Emma Woodhouse creates these reading lists filled with highbrow works that she never ever reads, and my lists are very much like that. But it only seems like I never read them just because they're so long. But earlier this year, it got far enough down my list that I actually got to start to read the series, and it's a long series. Each book isn't particularly long, but there's 12 of them. Um,
and apparently,
and
the first two or three are very difficult to get through.
well, now I need to reread it. So those books that I think are particularly important or I particularly enjoy go onto a second list, my reread list. And as I'm reading new books, I like to sprinkle in a reread. And this didn't make it to my reread list until book 4 at Lady Molly's. Um, but that was, I think that was mainly my fault rather than the book. So I can't give you an impartial judgment. I found them a struggle to get through, largely because the hero of the book, or the narrator of the book, is a chap called Nicholas Jenkins, who does nothing, thinks nothing, contributes nothing to society. And this, having just finished Proust Swan's Way, which is compared, um, the A Remembrance of Things Past and Dance to the Music of Time are compared quite frequently because they're both these monoliths, uh, great big long sagas of books. Uh,
But also
Obviously,
because Remembrance of Things Past is kind of
yeah,
a weird translation. It's I think it's
yeah,
actually In Search of Lost Time, and so there's a
yeah,
time thing.
yes.
Anyway,
Um, the, Proust is very much an internal writer, so you spend at least three quarters of Swan's Way inside the narrator's head. You know, you remember that sort of iconic scene with the Madeleine where he's transported to his childhood bed. You know, it's, is this real or is this happening inside your head? Well, yes, it's real, and yes, it's all happening inside the narrator's head. There's nothing happening inside Nicholas Jenkins' head. He's a narrator, so it's very much you're seeing what he's seeing in the outside world, but you don't really know what's going on inside him. Once you get used to being a passenger on his shoulder, and just observing what he's observing and essentially forgetting about the narrator, it becomes much more absorbing and much more enjoyable. Now, I managed to make that switch at book 4, and then 4, 5, and 6, I started to absolutely fall in love with the characters in the series, and it's a remarkable achievement. It is. It's a chronicle basically of a group of people from post First World War in the very early 1920s, when the narrator and his friends basically are schoolboys, through to the late 60s, early 70s, with counterculture and the majestic sweep in between, of course, punctuated by the epoch-making Second World War in London and elsewhere. A breathtaking, fabulous series. Two things that struck me particularly as a source for Rowling's Lake. There is a character called Bijou. Now, this is an unusual name. So when UK people read Bijou Watkins in the Strike series, it is a ridiculous, laughable name. Bijou is a description for a very small property in an estate agent. We don't recognize it as a person's name, so that jumps out immediately. There are aspects of the Bijou in Powell's books, her character to the character of Bijou in the Strike series. Not a very close link, but you can see reflections in it. The wow for me, but also I was a little bit nervous about it because again, other than this tweet we've had today, we've had no definitive evidence that there's any kind of emotional attachment that Rowling has to this series. It is the character of Trelawney. Now, it's well known within students of Powell's work that this is a cipher for Aleister Crowley. One of the fun things, actually, many of the characters are based upon real people of that time. And this was one of them, and it's a well-known cipher. This character is based on Crowley, but the name is Trelawney, and the way he speaks is very Sybil-esque. You know,
Rowling has said that Trelawney is based on the poet Trelawney, that was supposedly the worst poet in English history. And so she's given a definitive, tie. But the Trelawney in this book series, tied to Crowley, yes, and her being the Transfiguration teacher and the prophet, that is gold. Yes. That's so strong.
Yeah.
And then it makes funnier the connection between Strike singing the Trelawney song from Cornwall in book 5 as being a clear link to Order of the Phoenix in that inter-series parallel.
Yes.
But that Trelawney was originally Crowley, and that he's singing that song.
Yes.
In light of what this connection with Powell's series. Oh, Nick, this is gold. Seriously, I know that you're an attention-seeking, self-important reader of Rowling. You think you know more about Rowling than Rowling knows about herself. We know that's your problem, Nick. But if you wanted to kick back on that, you could say, "See, I have this intuitive sense." In fact, Nick, maybe Rowling only read those books because you observed this connection.
I think that's a real possibility, John. I think So the tweet that she wrote actually called out her favorite book. So she was responding to a tweeter that was talking about Powell's series, saying he recommends that people don't start at the beginning at book one. They start at either books 3, 4, or 5. Which is book 3 is The Acceptance World, book 4 is at Lady Molly's, and that's the book that I really started enjoying it from. And book 5 is Casanova's Chinese Restaurant. And it was Rowling replied to that with Casanova's Chinese Restaurant is my favorite of the series. I think it's very possible that Rowling understood that I was talking about this series as being an important work, and she's decided, well, I need to catch up on this quickly. I can't bother with the early books. Let's start with book 5.
Anyway, Nick, congratulations. That is Order of Rowling Readers, the Royal Order of Rowling Readers first class material, buddy. Your commendation is in the mail, overseas express. That's a fine. I also just dread the fact that you found this, because now I feel more than half obliged to at least read Casanova's Chinese Restaurant.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling you're not alone, and I think it's a little bit cruel. Reluctant as I am to criticize J.K. Rowling, I think it's a little bit cruel to tweet that just a couple of weeks before the Hallmarked Man is due to drop, and everyone's so busy rereading the series. I haven't finished Troubled Blood yet. I'm seriously behind, John. I'm thinking about cutting sleep so that I can finish the series before Hallmarked Man comes round.
Well, I get it. I mean, I've been trying to catch up on John Oxenham. I've read Maid of the Silver Sea, which is a very short read and hilariously rewarding for anybody who wants to see the strike connections. But I learned that that's not his only Sark novel. He's written 2 other Sark novels. It's just, anyway, plenty to read in the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about that. In fact, I've got a lot to be doing here. I'm supposed to be writing a post about the 4 lost child categories. That's 4 posts. I'm supposed to write about the, all the stuff that I talked about in the induced abortion hypothesis, the last Konrecki episode. I've got the long promised but never delivered write-up of the Nick. There I go. All right. I'm sorry.
Put
a break in there.
Let me put a break in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, when you're ready.
I've got the long. Wow, Nick. I have the long promised but never delivered write-up of the anti-feminist feminists Germaine Greer and Camille Paglia, with real focus on their ideas of rape, abortion, and transgenderism, not to mention the fact that they're like Rowling clones in terms of their upbringing and education, all of which opinions are echoed in Rowling's tweets or her novels. And we're in the final days of the run-up to Hallmarked Man. As you just said, my plate is full right now with that prep. And we've got a marketing blitz coming on. Rowling is tweeting, things that are absolutely mind-blowing. I want to talk about this Lake and Shed set of tweets she put out. I mean, that was, especially in the wake of the Konrecki thing. Yeah. I know we're self-important and attention-seeking, Nick, but do you think there's any possibility that those tweets were, forgive me, it was more valuable to me than the invitation to the Konrecki celebration, their private kind of, and what have we learned about the marketing blitz is picking up here for Hallmarked Man?
Yeah.
Tell me what we got.
Okay, so there's a lot of marketing stuff out there, and the marketing stuff is fairly typical. So we had the English language blurb, and that followed all the rules of marketing synopsis, in that it gives us some understanding of the case to come. without resolving anything. There's no twists in there, and it ramps up the tension. There's lots of questions and no answers, which is exactly what we want. Yeah. So we're all itching to get our hands on the book.
Someone's doing their job at Rowling Incorporated. That's great.
Yes. Now there's having a look at the German blurb. The German blurb was a pretty direct translation. And any differences between the German and the English could be taken as a translation artifact. Nothing there. However, on Reddit, there was a transcription translated into English of the Danish blurb, and there was some key differences in there. In that, it seemed to me that it broke the rules of the pre-publication synopsis, in that it indicated a twist. And I'll read the significant difference. The significant difference is we start off with a pretty typical marketing blurb statement. Decima Mullin's desperation pushes Strike and Robin to their limits, forcing them to navigate cryptic clues in a world where loyalty and betrayal go hand in hand. Okay, exciting? Yes. Builds anticipation? Yes. Tells us nothing? Absolutely. Then we get into, at the same time, Robin is forced to confront her own fears and starts to realize that her past may be more closely tied to this case than she first thought. Now, this is a twist. Okay, so this is, the case has something to do with Robin's past. That breaks the rule. That tells us something beyond the bare facts of the case. And then it goes on.
I'm sure that got Strike fandom into an absolute.
There was a
twist,
lot. Yeah, there was a lot of talk on it, and then the final different sentences. Strike, caught between his professional ethics and personal feelings, must make a crucial decision, one that could change their partnership forever. And we're back to sort of marketing blurb again. Ramps up tension, doesn't really tell us anything. Conflicts between.
Oh, come on, Nick.
Well,
that tells us, especially when it talks about Strike's ethics. Where is he keeping these ethics? Has he got a special drawer in his,
It doesn't say they're noble ethics, John. But you could apply that sentence. You could apply that sentence to any of the books that have gone before. Okay. It essentially tells us nothing. But for me, it's that twist that the case is closely tied to something in Robin's past is a twist. So, not trusting the translation that was on Reddit, I went looking for the Danish blurb in the original Danish, and I couldn't find it. There was no link in the original Reddit post, and for most of the subsequent talk about it, the source seems to be this Reddit post. So I can't say it's a fabrication.
That's too funny. I mean, basically, this could have been written by somebody, practicing their marketing chops to see if they can get Strike fandom to go into an absolute lather.
Yeah,
about that is hilarious.
But the author of that piece may be online. So no, John, we're not saying that. We are saying I can't find the original Danish. Now that may be just because I can't find it. They may have taken down the page. May have been an error going up in the first place. But in some of the robertgalbraith.com videos that were released on Instagram, so Rowling talks about Strike being reluctant to take the case because it involves people that Strike would rather not have to reconnect with. That's from Strike's past. So I'm wondering if there's some of that has got mistranslated and sort of chopped up into it somewhere. So it could be fraud, it could be error in terms of the Danish publishers. But what I don't think is I don't think it's real. So I'm not going to be reading this book anticipating that one of the twists is going to be the cases related to Robin's past.
I mean, again, this is one of the great differences between a fourth generation approach and the first, second, and third generation approaches, is that the first three generation approaches are really about the latest book or the book that's about to come out, and the people that in the fandoms, working really hard to figure out what the next book is going to include, and they spend a good deal. And I say they. This is what I did. I was a big part of those first three generations. That I would read the book basically with a scorecard in my head. Is that something I said? Does that match what I predicted? And that's not how you want to be reading a book. And the work you're doing when you're doing that, again, speaking from firsthand experience, is you're doing the work of the marketing team. You're working with without compensation, other than the pleasure it brings. It's fun. It is fun, right? Especially in company, with your friends online. But it does little to nothing. In fact, I would say it actually diminishes your experience of the book the first read through, and it's simply you're doing someone's job. They're supposed to get people ramped up and talking about these things online, and you're falling right into it. Now, again, if it's fun and you enjoy it, great. But I don't want to go into this thing. I haven't quite taken the I want to call it the Amish position on going totally blank or dark on Twitter, and I don't want to hear anything that Rowling has said or what Team Rowling has released about this in audio snippets or first chapters. I don't want to do any of that. I get that approach because they want their first read to be their first read and not colored by those things. But the most notable position on that person in that position also has spent the last 2-3 years following the Twitter headers and making predictions about it. So I mean, it's hard to stay on the pure Amish line on that. I'm looking forward to reading the book, but I'm not going to take the Amish line and stay off Twitter, and I'm not going to but I am going to laugh if that Danish preview is something that someone just did as a joke. Like this has happened during the Potter years when they would release titles, and people that made up titles, and people like myself would just scramble to understand what that title could possibly mean, and we found out it wasn't a title at all.
That was Rowling's marketing team. So Rowling's marketing team put these fake titles into the trademark database to conceal the real one, essentially.
Wow. So I mean, it is. It's too funny. Anyway, we're excited about these things, and we do have the 5-minute audiobook release, which apparently now has been withdrawn. Kelly Loomis wrote me yesterday and said, "Hey, that link in your post is dead." Yeah. It's not dead. It goes to the preview page at Apple Audiobook Previews, but there's no link to the 5-minute thing. So unless someone's got a transcription of it, we'll have to wait until the book arrives.
So there is a transcription on Reddit, and unlike the Danish blurb, I have actually read it while listening to the audiobook to confirm that it is more or less accurate.
Oh, that's great. And what spoiler alert, if you're on Team Amish here, you don't want to see it, tune out now. But we have the first. First, we don't know if this is the first chapter, and so there's a prologue that gives us the actual crime, which is sort of a model for books in the series. But it seems we have the first chapter, at least parts of the first 5 minutes of the first chapter. For me, the most interesting thing was the Hausman epigraph. I mean, that's because here we are all expecting Oxenham, but I think Rowling said somewhere that there were 5 sources for epigraphs,
Yes, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
So I think we can expect some more. So um we had a bit of fun some time ago when Rowling was tweeting about Houseman. She was uh tweeting from an introduction of, I think, a Penguin copy of Houseman, where the the chap who wrote the introduction, apologies if it's garbled, but if you look at Beatrice Grove's article on essefiles.com, she goes into this. But in the introduction, the chap quotes uh, a a reviewer of Hausman's works, and he was saying basically Hausman is one of my idols. He was a deeply unpleasant man, I paraphrase, with many awful personal characteristics, but has to be taken as one of the most notable of the UK's minor poets. And Rowling tweeted saying, "Well, wow, if Hausman was one of his all-time heroes, what does he write about people he doesn't like?"
Well, I can see how Rowling would really like Hausman. Um, not because she can be especially acerbic and
Yeah,
nasty in her tweets, but because the Hausman you know is a failed classicist. You know, he doesn't really
yeah,
graduate with a degree, and then he turns himself into what he teaches at Cambridge, right? I mean,
yeah,
he winds up as the
yeah,
classicist, and you know, as a person who had to study uh, several of the poets that he, especially Propertius, which I found to be just impenetrable as an undergraduate. Reading Propertius, um, I had this giant at the University of Chicago, Paul Wheatley, the chairman of the Committee on Social Thought, which, if you know anything about the University of Chicago, is like the pinnacle of brilliance at the university. Um, he was my college housemaster. He's kind of like Dumbledore, you know, at Hitchcock Hall. And he saw me at one of these sherry hours in the college house with my Oxford Blue Book of Propertius with a face of agony. And Wheatley came up to me and says, "Oh, you know, he was Australian, but he had an Oxbridge education. He was fluent in Chinese, Arabic, and his Latin and Greek were perfect." He starts in his Australian Oxbridge accent, you know, just reeling off Propertius, his favorite poems. And he says, "Oh, the only two poets worth knowing, lad, are Propertius and Robert Browning." And I'm just, you know, way on. This guy. Well, anyway, Hausman is like the expert on Propertius, and I'm just like, wow,
yeah,
okay, now I know this guy is a serious thing. I mean, not, but he again, he comes up, he does all that on his own. And he's recognized as an authority. He gets a job at what, the University of London. And then because of the work that he does, he's elevated to teach at Cambridge. I mean, just an amazing figure, and clearly had a chip on his shoulder about the whole thing. And in his spare time, he writes these really dark and melancholic poems about a unrequited love with a classmate of his, a male classmate of his. It's an astonishing personal history, but lovely poems.
yeah,
And many of them apparently have been made into musical songs. He uses lyrics,
yeah.
which apparently is something he has in common with Oxenham. So there's you know, speculation about whether that's the link. We're going to have, you know, World War I poets that whose poems were made into songs. Or the anyway. Again, come on, folks, just wait for the 5 epigraphs. We'll find out what the 5 ones are. You know, you're not going to get any, you know, no prizes if you drill all 5, you know, epigraph sources. Um, anyway, the Houseman one, it's that poem 11 from what last poems is beautiful, haunting. I guess it's what is the default description of that description of the ennui of daily life. Anyway, and that strikes agony clearly at the opening of the book is just frustration that Robin didn't take his clue at the end of Running Grave and drop Murphy and come running into his arms.
I mean, other than that, we've had. I mentioned briefly the videos that were on Robert Galbraith on the Instagram page. There were a few more that I think, again, they're really very markety. That they had the benefit of being in J.K. Rowling's voice, so you got to see J.K. Rowling talking about them. So I think the most memorable. What are the 3 words? So this is a great marketing ploy. So you're almost sure to give almost nothing away if you have to describe what is going to be a 1,000-page book in 3 words. And the 3 words she chooses is what marks us. So literal mark, physical mark, and what changes us, what leaves a scar. The book is dealing.
This is raw meat.
Yes.
into a dog fighting pit or something. Yes. What does that mean? And that will be very valuable after we've read the books.
In retrospect, you're right.
Yeah, to talk about what that means. But as a predictive device, as you said, it's like, well, look at that.
One of my personal favorites, just for the comedy value. So J.K. Rowling was asked, Strike and Robin, is it now or never? And instead of answering the question, J.K. Rowling asks us instead. She says, well, someone needs to speak up soon, don't they?
Yeah, but that led to one of the most valuable tweets that she's done. I mean, one that I'm gonna actually read this, Nick, if I can find it here on my computer. Here we go. Badly Wired Lamp comments just like you did, Nick. I love how JKR is all, well, someone needs to speak up, like she's just a strike fan commenting and not the person who wrote 8 books of a slow burn. Spot on, BWL. All right. And then we got to, someone tries to explain this about, how well you know your characters or whatever. And Rowling comes back with, and then these are 2 relatively long tweets, right? 3 or 4 paragraphs each. Rowling says, it isn't so much losing control as it's getting to the point where you know them so well, you know exactly what they would say, how they'd feel, etc. You know more about their interior lives than appears on the page. Writing them becomes a doubly subconscious process.
What a
because
phrase.
Because you're using your own and theirs.
Yeah.
In editing, you spot the false note where your own subconscious offered something theirs wouldn't have done. Now, again, this is important because Rowling has said her lake process of inspiration is about the workings of her subconscious. Here she's saying that the subconscious thing is active even while she's working in the shed.
Yeah.
That's never been said before. Well, she said a pretty clear dichotomy in her metaphor there.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's true. So I think what she's saying is when she's writing, she's using her subconscious. Then when she's in her shed editing, she's reading it back and saying, that's my subconscious would do that. Their subconscious wouldn't do that.
Okay. All right. So she goes on. At the same time, you have to be, anyway, I mean, this is Rowling talking about her subconscious and its role in her writing. This is really critical information.
Yeah.
Right? At the same time, you have to be able to step back and consider them, the characters, as others would. That's the place I'm usually in when I talk about characters in interviews, or like this blurb that she's just done, which is why it does indeed sound as though they're people I know on whom I'm taking notes. One of the reasons you'll never find me teaching a creative writing course, this is gold here, is that I find it unhelpful to try and analyze the subconscious part of my process, which I don't think can be taught. Duh. I mean, she knows that the inspiration is coming out of her unresolved personal issues or whatever. That's not something that you can say to somebody, well, here's how you get in touch with your subconscious. She talks about standing by the lake and having to just wait. Or she can tease the lake a little bit by walking away, but the lake's on its own schedule. I don't think this can be taught. It either happens or it doesn't, and with luck, you get better at harnessing it. Right? It's a process. I discussed this a bit. I love this. I discussed this a bit in the On Writing videos on my website. Maybe you should go over there and read that. Now, if you watch them, you'll understand when I say that I give interviews from the shed, not the lake. In terms of what she's just told us, that's not in that On Writing video.
Oh.
Anyway, but then we get Ludicrous Moniker, who talks about her trouble writing with fiction and her troubles with English literature. And says she doesn't have the right sort of brain. Anyway, Rowling comes to her defense and says some people write exceptionally well, i.e. have fabulous, well-appointed sheds full of tools and are excellent at the craft, but have very little lake. Now, this is the part that just blows my mind, Nick. This is where I think she's trying to say to us, hey, you guys talking about the lake, you're really not on target here. But have very little lake, parentheses, in effect, definition of lake, mysterious source of inspiration, ability to tap into something in the universal psyche that animates the best stories, close parentheses. To come back to that, you see it when talented journalists, literary critics, or opinion writers turn their hand to novels. And I think she's saying, Nick, that talented journalists, literary critics, or opinion writers should not turn their hand to novels. Then you get people who don't write beautifully, blunt tools, clumsy worksmen, yet have big, gorgeous lakes. I think that's, where she would put Stephenie Meyer in the Twilight novels, whom she recently wrote just horribly pedestrian and dismissive things about. Anyway, they produce the books that hit a zeitgeisty nerve or become universally beloved, even if they'll never win any literary awards. She may be talking about herself as well. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my very subjective opinion, it's much more common for lake owners to know they need better sheds than for owners of fancy sheds to realize they haven't got as so much as a puddle. Whoa. Okay. Again, Rowling's class bias there, right? It's just that the best writing has to have really strong lake inspiration. And she's just told us that that's the ability to tap into something in the universal psyche that animates the best stories. Nick, has she ever used the phrase universal psyche before in conjunction with the lake?
I mean, I haven't done a word search for it, but no, I can't recall her ever using that phrase.
Okay, Nick, let me help you out here. I mean, my PhD thesis is on the lake in the shed. Did I go over everything that she's written about the lake in the shed pretty closely? I mean, we're talking about anal retentive combing here. This is ridiculous. Things. No, universal psyche, nowhere mentioned. And we have no idea what that phrase means. I mean, you can take a Jungian perspective on that, and you get the collective unconscious and the animus mundi. You can it can be panpsychism, which goes back to the pre-Socratic philosophers and Zeno. And there with Anaxagoras, you have the nous, and you certainly have the idea that really animates Orthodox Christianity, which is, logos epistemology, that you have a logos within you that comes into the world in every man. That's John 1:9. And that logos is connected to the universal logos that incarnates as Jesus of Nazareth. And that logi, all the logoses that animate each one of us as individuals, having its connection to the universal logos, that's Samuel Taylor Coleridge and the entire English fantasy tradition. And I've tried to make that point. But we don't know. I mean, if
No.
Rowling had said that, we wouldn't have been talking about, your 12 book series at the start of this conversation, Nick. That's been the question: is Rowling more Jungian, or is she more esoteric, even mystical Christian? And there's a gap there. I mean, Rowling may try to, stand athwart that gap, but it's not a bridgeable gap. So fascinating, challenging tweet. Doesn't quite get the response that we want, from the people that she's corresponding with, but it is an invaluable thing. Now, Nick, being as self-important and attention-seeking as you are, do you imagine that she's actually responding to all those Connery things that to say,
So, so going back to the universal consciousness thing, I mean, could this be synchronicity? Could it be just we've got enough people thinking about Lake and Shed that this universal consciousness has leached through to her writing room in Edinburgh?
Too funny. Yeah, it must be that, Nick. It must be that we've sent the butterfly ripple, into the world, and it's reached Rowling's creative mind, and it's just sprang out of her lake in response to that. Regardless, certainly the most challenging and important Twitter week for tweet for Rowling studies that we've seen in many a day, and so thank you to all of the Twitter people that were involved in prompting that. It's funny because you look at the prompts and you're like, how did she get from that prompt to this statement? But there is a connection, and we certainly wouldn't have had it except for she was following these people. And so for those of us who are on Team Amish, at least with respect to following social media, hats off to you, because this is an incredibly important piece in Rowling studies. We'll be talking about this for ages. I mean, if this has jumped onto the 10 questions that we wish J.K. Rowling would answer in an interview. One is going to be, basically, what the hell did you mean by universal psyche, lady? What does that mean to you? Because that's a tease with enough gut to it.
I mean, it's something clearly she has pondered to at least herself. She's thought about this, and that phrase for sure has a specific meaning to her. I would love for her to share it.
I mean, it's going to be in the critical biography, Nick. But seriously, that you talked about this just the other day about Runcie's interview with her, Runcie Jr.
Yeah.
Talking to her about God. And she's really hesitant to use the G word, being a good English woman, and having a reversion to all things, religious. But when he asked her about the soul, totally on board with the soul. And so here's the universal psyche, as you said. You can't have what we've talked about as depictive psychology or psychomachia being such an important part of her work. That comment to Runcie about the soul being central, that makes perfect sense, because one of the 7 tools in her shed is depictive psychology or psychomachia, where she puts an allegorical soul inside there. That's a big part of what Rowling is writing about. It's one of her core beliefs, is about the immortality of the soul, hence morality and mortality. This is a very big deal. But when Rowling drops the word psyche in there, you don't know whether she's talking about neuroscientists' idea of mind, or whether it's, psyche means soul. And you put the universal thing in there, it can mean anything as diverse as the absolute, or just, archetypes in a Jungian, worldview with a very low ceiling. So, wow. This is a simultaneously exciting and distressing thing to drop in a tweet.
Wow. I don't know about everyone else, but you've just utterly changed my perspectives on what the possibility of that phrase could mean. So psyche is psyche. But that universal modifier in front for me meant, well, that's got to mean the soul, hasn't it? That if a universal psyche has to be soul based, but as you say, not necessarily, not necessarily.
Yeah,
Fascinating stuff.
yeah. Is she talking like a cognitive neuroscientist, or she's talking
Yeah,
as a perennialist?
yeah,
And they're going to use that same phrase and mean, you know, I hate to use this word, absolutely different things.
yeah.
So yeah, that just jumped on the list of things to talk about with Rowling. Um, whew, boy, Nick. Um,
There's a lot going on, isn't there, in this run up to publication? There's a
Days have we got
lot
left here?
going
I mean,
on.
this is we're getting tight
Well,
here.
from recording, we are less than 2 weeks. Well, we are 2 weeks away from at the point we're recording this. So you mentioned you've already read Maid of the Silver Sea, which I'm hoping to squeeze in as the last thing I read before Hallmark Man drops. But I'm nervous because I recognize I'm behind in my schedule already. What are you reading, John?
Um, I've read Maid of the Silver Sea, and they're
Yeah.
just hilarious connections to Lethal White in it. Just, I mean, oh well. Can I say white horses?
No,
Anyway,
no, no, no. You spoiled me. You can't spoil anyone else for that. I enjoyed being spoiled. There are people out there that do not.
anyway, I I am going to. I don't know what I'm going to do. I want to read the strike books in a blitz, and because I have the acquired perverse capacity to read books in a day, I may have time to read the seven strike books. Um,
Wow.
well, don't count on it. And then I have to read Casual Vacancy again. And for you, I know that would be, a trip to the beach, Nick. That would be a summer holiday. For me, when I pick up, Casual Vacancy, I you can see, I don't know if you can see all the stickers on here for the parts and the days and stuff. Um, yeah, that's a tough read. It's such a challenging thing, where you just recognize yourself in so many characters. Um, it's almost like, being left in a room of mirrors to just stare at yourself. But anyway, I want to read that because of Evan Willis's detritus theory. I mean,
Yeah.
there's at least three ideas of how how the parallel series idea is going to play out in books 8, 9, and 10. One of them is Louise Freeman Davis's incredible double ring theory,
Yeah.
which she came up with in 2023, and it's an important piece of work. I mean, Louise, her work on the 5-6 flip idea. Rowling dismissed the 5-6 flip idea out of hand. To me, that still remains one of the most important things that Louise Freeman Davis ever did. It was really a bold attempt to understand Rowling's writing process, and showed really a magisterial command of canon. And when it was dismissed out of hand, I really felt for her because I've never had Rowling reject, almost by name, one of my ideas. That must have been really hard. I mean, Louise is a scientist, so maybe, she's used to that kind of thing. I don't know, but I came to her defense and said, well, we'll see. I was so persuaded by her arguments that I wanted to, defend her. And recently, though, that's been thrown in my face as I know better than the author. That was funny. Anyway, Louise Freeman Davis has done this work with the double ring theory, which is a real challenge, let's say. It's very involved, and again shows Louise's maybe exclusive authority when talking about strike canon. I know that I just stand back almost in awe, of the connections that she recalls and makes. And she makes 25 connections between the 10 books. What we've already seen and what we'll probably see if this model holds up. And as I've already written, I find the double ring theory interesting because of the intersection. It shows the ichthys or the mandorla in terms of Christian iconography, which would be just a wonderful thing.
And that also appears in Rowling's favorite painting. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. We've talked about the Gainsborough. So it's not Gainsborough. It's Caravaggio. So that's exciting. And then the other theory is Evan Willis's Tetractys theory, in which he basically says we're going to see parallels in the last 3 books to the 3 books Rowling has written as solo ventures after the Harry Potter novels, namely Casual Vacancy, The Ichabod, and Christmas Pig. Now, if you haven't read Evan's thing, I'll put a link to it down below, as well as to Maurice Freeman Davis's double ring theory. I just feel obliged to read Casual Vacancy just so I have that fresh in mind. I know you don't need to, Nick, because you've got it memorized, but that for most of us, that's the book that we've only read once, maybe twice. Anyways, that's on my list.
Well,
what are you doing?
For a man that can read one of these in a day sitting, you only need 3 days, I estimate, to go through Anthony Powell's 12-book cycle. So,
sorry, maybe my Conrecki, your Conrecki is still, in the future, Nick. My Conrecki is way in my rear view mirror here.
I repeat it. It's a cruel time for Rowling to drop the Powell cycle into people's reading lists, waiting for.
I'm glad that she did. I mean, you pronounce this name Proust. I've only ever heard it pronounced Proust. But whatever. I'm so glad she didn't recommend that. I couldn't have. That's like someone saying, "How about Finnegan's Wake? How about we just take a tour through Finnegan's Wake?" Like, no, we're not going. Yeah, that's like this professor that I had at Chicago was lecturing about. He was a professor of rhetoric at the University of Chicago, and he had been studying as a graduate student in England, and he realized his Latin was really weak, and he was reading Chaucer and all these things, and his Latin, he had to, learn some Latin because he'd been a lit major, he'd never studied Latin, and so he called the University of London or one of these schools and said, I need to pick up some Latin for my studies here in the summer at Oxford. And this woman said to him, "Sir, one does not pick up Latin," and hung up on him. And I'm afraid Anthony Powell is not something you pick up, Nick, and read quickly. Anyway. We've got to come up with some decision about how we're going to, in the next week or two,
yes,
how we are going to read this new book, because the new book is really an opportunity for serious readers, especially serious readers of J.K. Rowling, to review not only what she's written already in terms of the book, so we have the plot points at hand, but to review the tools that she has in the shed. We haven't got a critical biography, so we can review all the link material. That right now only exists in your head, Nick. But those tools, there are. I wrote this up in my panic before Ink Black Heart because I was getting ready for my Viva Voce, interrogations. But those 9 guides are pretty solid, and I'll put a link to those down below. That maybe we should do a review of those things maybe the week before, and I can see three ways we read this.
Yeah.
The first way we read it is the way everybody reads it, which is everybody just does their first week, they read through it, and maybe they put things, they find all the gaffes and they list them at Hogwarts Professor, and
leave the phone off the hook. Just
that's right.
Dive in and finish the book.
Everybody's team Amish for the first 3 days. Yeah. I don't want to be spoiled by this. And that's I'm used to that. I've done that for 3 generations of Rowling studies. The next one is stuff that I've pioneered and that nobody has decided to join me in, Nick, and that is to read the Rowling work as if it's being released as a Dickens novel would have been released, which is to say that we get the prologue or the first part, maybe both of those, and we read that, and we wait for 2 or 3 weeks until we get the second part, and we go through all 7 or 9 parts of the book.
But really devour, discuss each part before we start reading the next part. So everyone who's in, this has to be a solemn pledge. We read the part, we devour it, we discuss it, and then we start the next.
Well, I'll tell you, Nick, as maybe the only person certainly in this room, but in the larger room of our audience, I'm the only person I know that's done that.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's not easy. And I'm not sure about what value it has. It's sort of like the people that predict, what's going to happen in the book.
Yeah.
Because as you're reading it, you're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the rest of the book. And that really, who wants to read that after you're done with it?
You're right. But I'm reminded of the Ichabod release, where it was such great fun. Now, nobody could cheat, because unless you had Rowling's manuscript, you read what the chapters that were released that day. We talked among ourselves. We came with crackpot theories that seemed to get crazier as the book went along. But we were all at exactly the same point. We had no advantage over each other. And then almost simultaneously, we'd all be reading the next section and itching to talk about it. Now, that was great fun. That was great.
It was.
Fun.
And the 9 guides, we were picking those things off as they came through.
Yeah.
We knew it was going to be a 7-week release. She told us it was going to be a 7-week release. And so we had an idea that she did what she, what we guessed is that there were 7 parts. And so we got to part 4. We were like, okay, here it is. This is where we get it. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, but that was not a 1,000-page novel.
No.
And everybody will have the whole thing there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would love to do that, but that's definitely going to have to be like a cult, and it would mean that even if we did each part and then we just did 3 days for each part, I'm telling you, if she's got 9 parts again, how many weeks is that, right? I mean, now we're talking about almost 4 weeks. That's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like the idea because I've done that, and it is fun, and it really is fun if you figure out how the murderer appears in the middle of the book, because that seems to be one of Rowling's things is to have some sort of cameo appearance, or even a person in disguise. I think twice this person's been disguised, in the thing. But I can't see people doing that. So, and then there's the we read it straight through, and then we go back and read the parts as if it's a Dickens novel coming in.
Okay.
That's a combination of the 2 approaches.
Of the 2.
Instead of everybody reads straight through and talks about it, or reads it Dickens style.
Right.
There's a combination of, okay, you got 4 days to read the book, and then we begin the piece by piece thing, knowing how it ends.
Okay. Well, what we could do is I could put, when this goes up on the Substack, which I think will be a few days' time, but when this goes up on the Substack, I could put a poll underneath of those 3 options. and we could see what the Substack subscribers think. Now, if it turns out I can't put a poll up in the Substack, you'll see a little apology at the bottom and a plead. Please cast your vote in the comments. But I think I can put a poll up.
Right, and clearly there'll be extra, no matter what we do. Yeah. There'll be extra goodies for the paid subscribers. Part of this conversation will not be available for free, and that's. I will include all the great finds that our conversations for the paid subscribers, talk about. But this is a real opportunity. If you're a serious Rowling reader, a new book is a time when not only do you get the plot points advanced. I don't expect we're going to find out whether Charlotte was murdered in this book. I don't think we're going to find out whether Robin is sterile in this book. There's all sorts of things like that will, people will be reading it, thinking about the theories that have been proposed here and elsewhere. But we will get definitely more of the same. We'll get more of Rowling's artistry applied to a different story. The tools in the shed, and I that's always very, very exciting to me.
Yeah.
And this Oxenham stuff. There's so many links. You wonder if Rowling read Oxenham as a child. I mean, again, Louise Freeman Davis here has written her post about Oxenham. You don't have to read the books. You just read Louise Freeman Davis's stuff about that. Maybe I should put that in the links too. Is because she just gives these almost page by page synopses of the books. It looks like Rowling is a big fan of John Oxenham, and funny enough, his daughter, Oxenham's daughter, Oxenham is a pseudonym. Oxenham's daughter wrote a 38-volume schoolgirl novels, the Abbey Girls. I talk about going down a rabbit hole. From what 1914 to 1970 or something. I mean, this is.
Now the works, certainly in contemporary UK, the works of both father and daughter are unknown. I mean, they're not talked about. They're not anything like famous. So you ask people to name schoolgirl stories, and we get Blighton, Mallory Towers. We get all of those, but unknown until Rowling. I suspect people will be starting to reprint those, just for the surge of interest that it must have had with Maid of the Silver Sea.
Maybe, but Ellie Oxenham's Abbey Girls thing, Nick, is a cult. I mean, there's the Ellie Oxenham. Forgive me if I butchered her first name. There's an Ellie Oxenham Society not only in the United Kingdom but in Australia and New Zealand and in Canada. And the collecting of the original volumes in that series, the first editions. I mean, it's not something that's the Ellie Oxenham cult, if you want to call it that, because it is a pretty narrow group of people that are borderline obsessed with her works. It's not like the Anne of Green Gables, Anne Montgomery people that again, global audience. I mean, Anne of Green Gables is huge in Japan. It's just it's that kind of thing. But it's a real thing. And maybe Rowling was one of those people growing up. Maybe this was the Abbey Girls. I think Molesworth is more important, or Tom Brown's School Days. But maybe I don't know. Maybe once again, Nick, I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe it's all about the Oxenham Abbey Girls books. That and the Colette books about schoolgirl things. Yeah. Seriously, there's a lot to read on these things. I mean, Rowling is a great introduction to English literature, Nick. Wouldn't you say?
No, it really is. And thank you, Anne B, for your guide. So Harry Potter's Bookshelf, which not only taught me what to read, but how to read. and Beatrice Grove's Literary Illusion, really for constructing one of my Emma Woodhouseian monster reading lists. It's just a superb start.
Oh well, Nick, you are sui generis, and and very generous, sui generis and very generous. That um, again, I'm going to loop back as being a ring composition. All of our conversations are ring compositions, right, Nick? Loop back to, again, just hats off. I should get my hat on to tip my hat to you on this find of this 12-volume series, well before Rowling decides to say, oh yeah, my favorite novel in that 12-book series is this, and my favorite character is this. And by the way, Trelawney comes from that series. Just a question, because I know nothing about these books.
Yeah.
What book does Crowley appear in?
So he's towards the back end. So I think we see him for a little bit pre-war. So we see him first in The Kindly Ones, which is sort of immediately pre-war. Then we get much more of him in the last two, Temporary Kings and Hearing Secret Harmonies.
Okay, so these books are released in the 50s, 60s, and 70s?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, 50s,
All right,
60s,
so
and 70s.
they were all available to Rowling as a precocious reader in comprehensive and at Exeter.
Yes, but I think as uh, well, even as a non-English lit undergraduate, let alone a Wydeen sixth form student, I think Rowling would be pretty much unique in tackling that series. It's
Well, Nick, there's a lot of things about this woman that are
yeah.
very unique. So you think that she came into it after?
I think for any normal individual, yes, I think so. So when I see people discussing this online, it's people a little bit like myself that either have carried through a love of literature into adulthood, so late 20s, early 30s, or they've rediscovered it and are going off personal recommendations. They're the people I seem to see talking about reading this series. Just the sheer size of it is a bit of a blocker. So you is not going to appear on certainly a comprehensive school syllabus. It's just too big.
And no single volume would be part of an A-list reading.
Well, again, I think my takeaway from the first novel isn't an accurate representation because I was reading it all wrong. But listening to other people, it isn't by any style the best of the series. You can pick up any one of the books, but you don't get that rich history of the characters that you do get through reading through the cycle. And certainly getting on to the war years and post-war, it is that history you have with the characters that adds to the majesty of the work.
Well, I'm gonna tell you a story, Nick. I'm gonna pick up my autobiography here and tell you why I think she read it when she was a comprehensive student.
Okay.
When I was a lad, back when dinosaurs walked the earth, I was in a great books class at Phillips Exeter Academy, and I was blessed to have a teacher named Fred Tremolo. Wonderful character, looked like Hemingway. I think that was an intentional stylism, and he understood how to lead that Harkness table discussion like few men. And I saw on his desk, and we were doing a fire hose trip through the great books in Western literature. And I saw on his desk a well-worn paperback copy of the best or worst of S.J. Perelman. And I had never heard of S.J. Perelman. Most people know S.J. Perelman because he was one of the screenwriters for the Marx Brothers films, but he really is one of the most, well, the funniest writers that ever wrote at the New Yorker. I mean, his parodies and such are just laugh. I mean, fall down on the ground laughing, funny. His witticisms and wordplay and this and that. And I'd never heard Tremolo mention that book, but I saw it on his desk, Nick. And so guess what I did, you know? In my first weeks at the University of Chicago, I was just hounding the bookstores in Hyde Park, and I saw the most of S.J. Perelman, the paperback edition that I'd seen on Tremolo, and I picked it up and read it, and it, you know, I recommend it to everybody, and I have ever since. My bet is that Lucy Shepherd had a copy of one of those books on her desk, and that Rowling thought to herself, if Lucy Shepherd is reading this,
Yeah.
I've got time for this. If Lucy Shepherd is reading this, anyway, there's my projection, my self-important, and what was the phrase? Attention seeking. There we go. There's my attention seeking attempt at that. All right, Nick. Our next conversation will either be the 9 guides to keep in mind while reading the Hallmarked Man, Strike 8, or directions about how we're going to read it, or both.
Yes, I think it's good. It needs to depend on the results of the poll. So please do vote. This is not a democracy, so the result of the votes may be ignored if we get some really good comments that explain why we have to do it a different way. So what we'll probably do, John, we'll probably put this episode out a little bit early, so it won't be a full week after the previous episode, to give people a chance to vote, and then we can decide what we're going to do, and we'll talk about it in the next show. That's great. It's great. In case Nick and I disagree about which approach to use, our paying subscribers will have the deciding vote. We'll have a separate poll for them. All right. Thanks again, Nick. And again, congratulations on your, I don't know how you do this. I just say you have some secret. I think DB Mac. I think that you've got the back channel. You're the back door man. You know what's going on inside Team Rowling's real headquarters. Anyway, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and to have my day destroyed by the discoveries that you've made as I try to research what you've done. Great talking to you as well, John. I can't promise a bombshell for next week, but let's see what a week of Rowling tweets will give us. Yeah. Anyway, off to the universal psyche. Yeah. Take care, John.